On the morning of May 11th, 2021, a young mother lay lifeless in her bed. Her 11-month-old baby was crying beside her. Her husband was found tied up downstairs, blindfolded, begging for help. He told police that masked intruders had broken into their home, robbed them, and taken his wife's life. The nation wept for him, the world believed him. For 38 days, he played the role of the grieving husband so perfectly that even seasoned investigators were fooled. He stood at his wife's grave, holding their baby daughter, and delivered a heartfelt eulogy that moved hundreds to tears. But here's the thing about lies: they leave traces. And sometimes, the very technology we wear on our wrists can become the silent witness that speaks for the dead. This is the story of Caroline Crouch, a young woman whose life was stolen by the one person who promised to protect her, and how a simple smartwatch helped expose the truth that her killer tried so desperately to bury. Some love stories begin like fairy tales. Boy meets girl, they fall in love. They build a life together, they welcome a child into the world. And from the outside, everything looks perfect. Social media is filled with smiling photographs. Friends and family see a couple deeply in love, but behind closed doors, the truth can be something else entirely. Caroline Louise Crouch was born on July 12, 2001. She was the daughter of retired engineer David Crouch and his wife, Susan de la Cuesta. Through her father, she held British citizenship. According to her father, Crouch was born in Athens, though her birthplace has also been reported as Liverpool. At the age of 8 years old, she moved with her family to the island of Olenizos, where she grew up. Olenizos is a small Greek island in the Aegean Sea. It's the kind of place where everybody knows everybody. The waters are crystal clear. The pace of life is slow, and for a young girl like Caroline, it was paradise. Caroline was an adventurous spirit who grew up on the serene island of Olenizos. She embraced the coastal life with a love for scuba diving and swimming. She was bright, she was full of dreams, and she had her whole life ahead of her. But then everything changed. At a Good Friday parade on the island in 2017, a then 15-year-old Caroline met pilot Babis Anagnostopoulos, who was 13 years her senior. Despite the large age gap, the relationship was deemed legal, with the age of consent in Greece being 15. Now let's pause here for a moment. A 15-year-old girl. A 27-year-old man. He was nearly twice her age. He had money, he had a career. He flew helicopters for a living, and he set his sights on a teenage girl. At just 15 years old, Caroline was swept off her feet by the handsome pilot, who wooed her with grand gestures, including flying a helicopter over her school. For a young girl on a small island, it must have felt like something out of a movie. Here was this older, successful man, literally flying over her school to get her attention. It was romantic, it was exciting, it was everything a teenager might dream of. But what looks like romance from one angle can look very different from another. The subsequent revelations in the Greek press that Anagnostopoulos had begun a relationship with Crouch when he was 28, and she was 15, has raised questions in Greece about whether the authorities ignored a case of child abuse that eventually resulted in murder. Many commentators pointed out the large age difference between Caroline and her husband, which raises concerns about grooming and power dynamics. When you're 15, you don't always recognize the warning signs. You don't understand what control looks like when it's wrapped in expensive gifts and grand gestures. You don't see the danger in a man who wants you all to himself. But Caroline was in love, or at least she believed she was. When Caroline turned 17, Anagnostopoulos proposed, and the following year they eloped in the Algarve, Portugal. She was barely an adult when she became a wife. She hadn't finished school. She hadn't experienced the world. She had gone straight from being a teenager on a small island to being married to a helicopter pilot with his own plans for their future. The couple moved to a luxurious home in the Athens suburb of Glycanera and gave birth to their daughter in June 2020. Their daughter's name was Lydia, and from the outside, everything seemed perfect. The Instagram photos showed a happy couple, a beautiful baby, a comfortable home. A life that many would envy. Social media depicted a happy couple, but behind closed doors, their marriage was turbulent. That's the thing about social media. It only shows what people want you to see. The perfect moment, the flattering angle, the carefully chosen filter. But it never shows the fights that happened 5 minutes before the photo was taken. It never shows the tears that came after. A diary later discovered hidden in Caroline's wardrobe contained entries implying her husband was dangerous. Chillingly, the diary passages had been written in code. Suggesting it was to prevent Anagnostopoulos from reading if he found it. Think about that for a moment. A young woman in her own home writing her private thoughts in code. Because she was afraid of what might happen if her husband found out what she was really thinking. The heartbreaking diary of Caroline Crouch reveals the Brit mum was considering leaving her husband even before she fell pregnant. Diary entries dating back to 2019 reveal that the couple's relationship was far from perfect and was filled with arguments and physical abuse. In a chilling entry from December 2019, Caroline wrote, "I fought with Barbie again. This time it was serious. I hit him, I cursed at him, and he broke down the door." The relationship was volatile. There were arguments, there was anger, and Caroline was trapped. She was young. She was far from her family on Olenizos. She was financially dependent on a man who had swept into her life when she was just a child. Another diary entry, a month after the birth of baby Lydia, in July 2020, reads, "Today my little one is a month old. It's also the day I told Barbie I want to leave. I feel awful." Just 1 month after becoming a mother, Caroline was already planning her escape. But leaving is never as simple as it sounds, especially when you have a baby. Especially when you're young, especially when you're afraid. Even before their daughter was born, Crouch was considering leaving Anagnostopoulos. She wrote in her diary, "After a few tears and a lot of shouting, I told him that before I fell pregnant, I'd been thinking of leaving him. But then after I became pregnant, I stayed with him so our daughter would not grow up without her 2 parents." Caroline stayed for her daughter. She stayed because she wanted Lydia to have both parents in her life. She stayed because she thought it was the right thing to do. But sometimes, staying is the most dangerous choice of all. The night of May 10th, 2021, started like any other evening in the Anagnostopoulos household. Caroline was upstairs in the attic bedroom, Babis was downstairs. And their baby daughter Lydia was asleep, but that night, something was different. Police found that the couple had been fighting that night. A senior detective working on the case said Anagnostopoulos told them he had been fighting with Caroline for some time. And they were fighting that night, exchanging heated text messages while he was on the ground floor and she was in the attic. They weren't even in the same room. They were texting each other angry messages from different floors of their own house. That's how bad things had gotten between them. According to messages from Caroline's phone, she had messaged her friend on the night of her death, telling them she was planning to leave Babis. Detectives also revealed that the young mum had tried to book herself into a hotel that very same night. Caroline had finally made her decision. She was going to leave. She was going to take her daughter and get out. She had even tried to book a hotel room to escape to that very night. But she never got the chance. The investigator said that when Caroline texted her husband that he was mad, he lost his cool. Something in Babis snapped, the woman he had pursued since she was 15. The woman he had married when she was barely an adult. The woman who had given him a daughter. She was going to leave him. And he wasn't going to let that happen. The prosecutor said that Anagnostopoulos was in a calm frame of mind, and that his actions were vindictive and premeditated. He put the child to sleep on the couch, then went up to kill Caroline. This refutes the claim of an agitated state of mind and shows premeditation. He didn't lose control in a moment of passion. According to the prosecutor, he calmly placed his baby daughter on the couch downstairs. And then he walked upstairs to the attic bedroom where his wife was sleeping. The prosecutor cited evidence from the smartwatch that Caroline was wearing, which proved that she had been asleep when he started to choke her. She was asleep, she didn't see it coming. She went to bed that night, probably still upset from their argument, probably still planning her escape, probably dreaming of a better life for herself and her daughter. And she never woke up. Caroline Crouch's heart rate surged as her husband smothered her with a pillow, a coroner's report said. Data from the 20-year-old's smartwatch showed her pulse went up by 50% as she was attacked by Babis Anagnostopoulos. At 4:01 a.m., Caroline's smartwatch recorded a sudden intense pulse stimulation before her heart stopped beating at 4:11 a.m. For 10 minutes, maybe more, Caroline fought for her life. Her heart rate spiked as she struggled to breathe, as she fought against the pillow being pressed against her face, as she realized what was happening to her. The Brit mum was asleep right before she suffered an agonizing, not instant death, with her husband smothering her for at least 5 to 6 minutes. Crouch, who was 2 months short of her 20th birthday when she died, was subjected to a long and agonizing death, according to a state coroner who examined her body hours after the incident. She was 19 years old, just 2 months away from her 20th birthday. She had a baby daughter who would never remember her. She had parents who loved her. She had a whole life ahead of her, and it was all taken away by the man who promised to love and protect her. Now here's where the story takes its darkest turn. After Babis Anagnostopoulos took his wife's life, he didn't panic. He didn't call for help. He didn't show any remorse. Instead, he began to plan. Babis's cold and calculated actions following the murder were chilling. He placed their infant daughter next to Caroline's lifeless body, tied himself up, and waited hours before calling the police. His confession revealed the extent of his manipulation, not just in staging the crime scene, but in the way he had managed to fool everyone, family, friends, and even law enforcement. Read that again. He took his 11-month-old baby daughter and placed her next to her dead mother's body. He positioned the scene for maximum sympathy, for maximum impact. He wanted whoever found them to see a crying baby next to her murdered mother. The pilot is accused of laying their baby daughter next to her mother's body in a bid to make the staged robbery look more convincing. But he wasn't done. An Athens court found Babis Anagnostopoulos guilty of murdering Caroline Crouch in May 2021 as the couple's 11-month-old daughter slept in the house. He was also convicted of strangling the couple's dog to lend credence to the narrative that the family fell victim to a house invasion. In a bid to make his lies look more believable, he also drowned the family's husky puppy. The family dog, an innocent animal, he killed the dog too, because he thought it would make his story more believable. Robbers, he would say, were ruthless enough to kill even the family pet. One of the pieces of evidence that could allegedly discredit the pilot's timeline of events was that the memory card from the couple's security camera was removed at 1:20 a.m. 2.5 hours before Caroline is thought to have died. Babis claimed that on May 11, 2021, the thieves had broken into the family home nearly 5 hours later and destroyed the surveillance device on their way inside. However, the last image from the CCTV camera shows him sitting on the sofa cradling his 11-month-old daughter at 12:35 a.m. while texting with Caroline, who was in the attic room. He removed the memory card from their security camera hours before the alleged break-in. He disabled the surveillance system that would have recorded what really happened that night. He thought of everything, or at least he thought he did. When the sun rose on May 11, 2021, Babis Anagnostopoulos called the police. And the story he told them was a masterpiece of deception. Crouch's husband, Babis Anagnostopoulos, initially told officers and the worldwide press that his young wife had been killed by home invaders, who had tied him up in the next room. Anagnostopoulos, 34, had alleged that 3 men had broken into the house, tying him up and killing his wife before making off with €15,000 in cash in addition to valuables. He also said they had killed the family dog, 3 masked men, foreigners, he said. They had broken in during the night, they had tied him up, they had blindfolded him. They had demanded money, and when his wife couldn't give them what they wanted, they suffocated her. Per tabloid reports, upon entering the property, police discovered Anagnostopoulos handcuffed to the floor, with duct tape over his eyes and mouth. When police arrived, they found him bound and gagged, helpless, a victim himself. The devoted husband who couldn't save his wife. It was a performance worthy of an award. Police have described the killer as a top-class actor for staging the elaborate crime scene and playing the grieving widower for over a month. The media coverage was immediate and intense. The case was extensively covered by Greek and international media due to developments during its investigation. Because of Crouch's British background, the case of her murder attracted the attention of major international media, such as the British newspapers The Guardian, as well as the Sky News and BBC News networks. Greece was horrified. The case horrified Greece, where violent crime, aside from frequent mafia-related murders, is exceedingly rare. The murder of young wife and mother Caroline Crouch, aged just 20, in the quiet Athenian suburb of Glyconera on May 11th, shocked the country, where such brutal killings are rare. A young mother, a baby left crying beside her body. A family torn apart by senseless violence. The nation grieved with Babis Anagnostopoulos. And he played his part perfectly. He told Greek television, "I cannot describe it. I cannot describe it. Police are doing their job and they will catch them. I hope what my family and the family of my wife has been through will not happen to anyone again." He appeared on television. He gave interviews. He spoke about his pain, his loss, his hope for justice. His tribute to his wife, posted on Instagram a few days after the murder, now reads like a psychopathic horror story. He posted a picture of the couple on their wedding day with the caption, "Together forever. Have a nice trip. My love." He then stated that he was sad that our daughter will grow up without remembering her beautiful mother, who was the joy of my life. Together forever, he wrote that. The man who had suffocated his wife with a pillow wrote, "Together forever," on a photo of their wedding day. And people believed him. They sent him messages of support. They offered their condolences. They prayed for him and his daughter. Shortly after her murder, Caroline was laid to rest on the island where she grew up in front of hundreds of mourners. Anagnostopoulos, who was pictured crying and holding his daughter, read out a moving eulogy. "I was very lucky that I knew Caroline and that she loved me. I was very lucky for all the moments we shared. One thing that makes me even more sad than her death is the fact that our daughter will grow up without remembering her beautiful mother, who was the joy of my life. He stood at her funeral, on the island where she grew up, in front of her parents, in front of her friends, in front of hundreds of people who loved her, and he cried. He held their baby daughter. He delivered a eulogy about how lucky he was to have known her. The man who killed her, speaking about how lucky he was. If you're feeling sick right now, you should be, because what Babis Anagnostopoulos did wasn't just murder. It was a complete betrayal of everything that trust and love is supposed to mean. Anagnostopoulos kept up the convincing act for 38 days, attending Crouch's memorial service on the island of Alonissos, and appearing on Greek television to appeal for information on the alleged killers. For 38 days, he lived this lie. He ate breakfast every morning knowing what he had done. He looked at his daughter knowing he had taken her mother from her. He hugged Caroline's grieving mother knowing he was the reason for her pain. For over a month, he lived a lie, playing the grieving husband while basking in the sympathy of the public. And all the while, the police were chasing ghosts. The fact that Anagnostopoulos, who later confessed to the crime, blamed foreigners, specifically Albanians, for the murder, also highlighted what many believe is rampant prejudice against the group in the country. He blamed Albanians, he gave descriptions, he helped create police sketches. He pointed investigators in every direction except the truth. Greek cops spent weeks looking for a fictional Albanlan gang before finally realizing Babis's story didn't add up. During the first days of the investigations, a 43-year-old man, a citizen of Georgia, was arrested as he tried to cross the border into Bulgaria with a fake passport. However, no evidence connecting him with the case was found. Innocent people were suspected. An innocent man was even arrested. Because of the lies Babis told, the investigation seemed to be going nowhere. The fictional robbers remained at large. The grieving husband remained above suspicion. But here's the thing about lies: they're fragile, and the more elaborate they are, the more points of failure they have. Babis Anagnostopoulos thought he had planned the perfect crime. He thought he had accounted for everything, but he forgot about the smartwatch. In the world of modern crime investigation, we often talk about fingerprints, DNA evidence, eyewitness testimony. But in the case of Caroline Crouch, the key to unlocking the truth wasn't any of those things. It was a smartwatch, a simple device worn on her wrist. Something millions of people wear every day without thinking twice about it. But in death, that smartwatch became Caroline's voice, her final witness. The silent testimony that would expose her husband's carefully constructed web of lies. Data from his own phone, his wife's smartwatch, and their home surveillance system all contradicted his version of events. Let me explain how the investigation unraveled. As days turned into weeks, inconsistencies in Babis's account began to surface. Security footage from the area raised doubts about the timing of the break-in, and no DNA or fingerprints were found at the crime scene. You would think that if 3 masked men broke into a home, tied up a family, and committed such a violent act, they would leave something behind. A hair of fiber, a single drop of sweat, but there was nothing. There was no indication that a break-in occurred at their home. Officers discovered no fingerprints or DNA samples at the scene, as well as no camera footage or cell phone records. Police searched the neighborhood. They reviewed footage from security cameras in nearby houses and shops. They looked for any sign of the escape vehicle that the supposed robbers used. The investigations of the prosecuting authorities continued with the search for the escape vehicle of the perpetrators. Analyzing data from the security cameras that were present in nearby houses and shops in the area of Glycanera, without finding anything related to the case. Nothing, absolutely nothing. It was as if these three masked men had appeared out of thin air, committed a brutal crime, and then vanished without a trace. Because they never existed. The breakthrough came from the digital evidence. From the analysis of the digital evidence of both the victim and her husband, it was found that there was a significant discrepancy in the times reported by Anagnostopoulos during his statement to the prosecuting authorities. In particular, the camera's memory card had been removed at 01:20 instead of 04:30, which according to Anagnostopoulos was the time the robbers entered the house. That's more than 3 hours of difference, 3 hours that Babis couldn't account for. 3 hours in which he was supposedly asleep, unaware that intruders were about to break into his home. But it got worse. Crouch's biometric watch also showed her heart had stopped beating at 04:11. If the robbers broke in at 04:30, as Babis claimed, how could Caroline have been dead 20 minutes before they even arrived? The math didn't work, the timeline made no sense. And the technology that Babis probably never even thought about was telling a story completely different from the one he had rehearsed. Finally, the analysis of the husband's mobile phone applications showed that some applications were running during the time he allegedly was bound and gagged. Think about that for a moment. Babis told police he was tied up, blindfolded, helpless, unable to move, but his phone told a different story. Specifically, during the period when he claimed to have been completely immobilized and tied up by the burglars, unable to assist his wife as she was being suffocated, police found that he was actively using his phone. They were even able to determine from an app that tracks users' steps that Anagnostopoulos was up and walking around during the time he stated he was tied down by the intruders. Some of the new evidence came from the pilot's own mobile phone. As police revealed, an app had tracked his repeated steps from the attic to the basement of the home. At the time, he had claimed to be blindfolded and tied up by the alleged robbers. He was walking around his house, moving from the attic to the basement. At the exact time, he claimed to be bound and gagged, unable to help his wife. His own technology betrayed him. But the most damning evidence came from Caroline's smartwatch. Data from the device showed that Caroline's heart had stopped several hours before Babis claimed the robbery had occurred. Caroline's smartwatch had been tracking her heart rate, her sleep, her activity levels, and on the night of May 10, 2021, it recorded everything. Biometric data from the fitness accessory on Crouch's wrist at the time of her death showed that the Brit woman had stopped breathing hours before her husband had said she'd been killed. The watch showed when her heart rate suddenly spiked, when she woke from sleep in a state of panic, when her body fought for survival, and when her heart finally stopped beating. Additionally, Caroline Crouch's smart watch, which tracked data regarding her health, including her heart rate, showed the exact moment of her death. Technology doesn't lie. Technology doesn't cover up for anyone. Technology simply records the truth, whether we want it to or not. And the truth was devastating. On 17 June, a police helicopter was sent to Alanissos, where the victim's memorial service was being held. The police officers who went there informed the victim's husband that new important information had emerged in the case and urged him to follow them immediately to Athens. Picture this scene. It's June 17, 2021, 37 days after Caroline's death. A memorial service is being held on the island of Alanissos, where she grew up. Hundreds of mourners have gathered to remember her. And there, in the middle of it all, is Babis Anagnostopoulos, the grieving husband. Still playing his part, still accepting condolences, still hugging Caroline's mother. When asked why he had to leave the island so quickly before his confession, Anagnostopoulos told reporters that police had informed him that they found the ringleader of the murder and needed him to come identify him in person. He said this while hugging Caroline Crouch's mother, who had just held a memorial service for her daughter. Even at that moment, even as the police helicopter landed to take him away, he was still lying. He told Caroline's family that the police had found the killers, that they needed him to identify them, that justice was finally coming. But it was Babis himself who had become the focus of the investigation. Cops allowed him to attend a memorial service in Caroline's honor on Wednesday in order for him not to take fright, where he told her loved ones he had been asked to identify a new suspect. It was in fact Babis himself who had become the focus of the investigation. After detectives were able to untangle his web of deceit by analyzing the couple's smart devices. The police had played it perfectly. They let him attend the memorial. They let him continue his performance, and then, when the moment was right, they swooped in. Anagnostopoulos was arrested more than a month after Crouch's death, while attending a memorial service for her near her family home on the Aegean Sea island of Elanissos. Anagnostopoulos was arrested more than a month after Crouch's death, after attending a memorial service for her near her family home on the Aegean Sea island of Elanissos. He was seen hugging the victim's mother before being led away. He hugged Caroline's mother, the woman whose daughter he had suffocated, the woman he had been lying to for 37 days. He hugged her, told her the killers had been found, and then stepped onto a police helicopter. It would be the last time he would walk free. Babis Anagnostopoulos was picked up after attending his late wife's memorial service on the island of Elanissos, where she grew up. From Elanissos, he was transferred to Skiathos. From there, he flew to Athens. And at the General Police Directorate of Attica, he was presented with the evidence. All of it, the smartwatch data, the phone records, the surveillance system timestamps, the step counter that proved he was walking around his house, the memory card that was removed hours before he claimed the intruders arrived. But in a sensational twist, the Hellenic police said on Thursday that Anagnostopoulos had confessed to murdering his British wife while he was being questioned about inconsistencies in his story. For 37 days, Babis Anagnostopoulos had fooled everyone, his family, his friends, the media, even experienced investigators who had initially believed his story. But when confronted with the irrefutable evidence, his carefully constructed facade crumbled. He confessed after 8 hours of questioning, police said. On Thursday night, he confessed that he himself was the murderer after nearly 8 hours of police questioning. 8 hours, that's how long it took for the truth to finally come out. But even in his confession, Babis tried to control the narrative. But even in his confession, he spun a tale of self-justification. He claimed that the couple had argued on the night of the murder and that Caroline had threatened to leave with their daughter. In a fit of rage, he said, he lost control and suffocated her with a pillow. He blamed Caroline. He said they were fighting. He claimed she pushed him, punched him, threatened to take their daughter away. That night, we had been fighting since early in the day. At one point, she threw the baby into its bassinet and told me to get up and leave the house. She pushed me and punched me. I blurred and suffocated her, and then I staged the crime scene, the 32-year-old helicopter pilot stated in his confession. He wanted people to believe it was a crime of passion, a moment of temporary insanity, something that just happened in the heat of an argument. But the evidence told a different story, noting that there was absolutely no evidence that the defendant had acted out of rage or in the grip of other strong emotions, but rather that he was in a calm frame of mind, and that his actions were vindictive and premeditated. He put the child to sleep on the couch, then went up to kill. This refutes the claim of an agitated state of mind and shows premeditation, the prosecutor said. He didn't kill Caroline in the middle of an argument, he waited. He put their baby daughter on the couch downstairs. And then, calmly, methodically, he went upstairs to the attic bedroom where Caroline was sleeping. The prosecutor cited evidence from the smartwatch that Caroline was wearing, which proved that she had been asleep when he started to choke her. The watch also provided evidence of how long it took Anagnostopoulos to kill Caroline Crouch. She was asleep, she never saw it coming. She went to bed that night after a horrible fight with her husband, and she never woke up. Harmanis noted that, "I told the court that, if you recognize anger on a sleeping victim, it will be the first time in history that something like this happened." He made the decision to end Caroline that night when she announced that their relationship was over. You cannot claim you killed someone in a fit of rage when they were asleep. You cannot say you lost control when you carefully placed your baby on a couch before going upstairs. You cannot pretend it wasn't premeditated when you disabled security cameras and removed memory cards hours before the act. Anagnostopoulos later admitted he had suffocated his wife with a pillow before panicking and staging the fake robbery because he wanted to make one last attempt so that Lydia might at least grow up with her father. He said in his police testimony, "He staged the entire robbery. He killed the family dog to make it look more convincing. He tied himself up. He placed his own baby daughter next to her dead mother's body. And then he called the police and told them a story about 3 masked men who never existed." As for his attempt to divert the investigations by claiming the crime was a robbery, he attributed it to not wanting their 11-month-old child to grow up without either of her parents. He said he did it for his daughter, so she wouldn't grow up without both parents. But the prosecutors saw through this manipulation as well. The prosecutor said, highlighting the fact that the defendant had then placed the baby on the body of the dead mother when staging the supposed robbery in order to evoke sympathy. He placed his daughter next to her mother's lifeless body, not to protect her. Not out of love, but to evoke sympathy, to make himself look like a victim. To manipulate the emotions of investigators and the public. On 18 June, the confessed perpetrator was charged with 2 felonies and 2 misdemeanors, namely, murder committed in a calm state of mind, animal abuse, false reporting, and false testimony due to the statements he gave to the prosecuting authorities. On 22 June, he was imprisoned on charges of murder and animal abuse. The trial began on April 8, 2022, nearly a year after Caroline's death. The trial of Babis Anagnostopoulos for the murder of his wife, Caroline Crouch, began on 8 April 2022 in the Athens mixed jury court, where he initially pleaded not guilty to charges of premeditated murder, though he had previously confessed to the killing. The proceedings, which lasted nearly 6 weeks, involved a 7-member court panel and featured extensive witness testimonies and expert analyses. Despite having confessed to the police, Babis entered a plea of not guilty. He claimed his wife's murder was not premeditated. At trial, Anagnostopoulos claimed that his wife's murder was not premeditated, but was the result of being in a blurred state of mind. The killer had previously attempted to blame Caroline's dangerous outbursts and claimed he had been a victim of her physical abuse. He tried to paint himself as the victim. He accused Caroline of being violent, unstable, and abusive. The 19-year-old mother who had written in her diary about her fear of him. The young woman who had been trying to escape him on the very night he killed her. In an incredible testimony, that lasted 10 whole hours. Anagnostopoulos devoted 6 hours to claim that the couple was living a fairy tale love. In this theatrical show of tears and regrets, he accused his allegedly much-beloved wife, as he claimed of being a bad mother and a moody, unpredictable person that beat him. He testified for 10 hours. 6 of those hours were spent claiming they had a fairy tale love. And then he called Caroline a bad mother, the woman he murdered. The mother of his child, he called her a bad mother, but the jury wasn't fooled. On 16 May 2022, approximately 1 month after the start of the trial, the joint jury unanimously found Babis Anagnostopoulos guilty of murder committed in a calm state of mind, killing a companion animal, as well as the misdemeanors of false report and false testimony. Earlier on Monday afternoon, the mixed jury court in Athens unanimously found Monday afternoon helicopter pilot Babis Anagnostopoulos guilty for the murder of his young wife, British-born Caroline Crouch. The murder was committed in cold blood and in premeditation, so the verdict. Unanimously, every single member of the jury agreed it wasn't a crime of passion. It wasn't a momentary loss of control. It was cold-blooded, premeditated murder. The jury also unanimously refused to accept any attempts by the defendant to achieve mitigating circumstances, such as a crime committed in the heat of the moment, or his previous lawful life, and his good behavior while in custody pending trial. The court recognized no mitigating circumstances, none. His defense about losing control was rejected. His claims of being abused by Caroline were rejected. His entire narrative was rejected. Babis Anagnostopoulos, 34, was sentenced to life in jail on Monday for the premeditated murder of his British-Greek wife Caroline Crouch, 20 on 11 May 2021, following an earlier unanimous guilty verdict the same day. Following a 6-day trial, a panel of 3 full-time judges and 4 jurors found that Babis Anagnostopoulos, 34, suffocated Caroline Crouch, aged 19, to death and had planned the crime in the hours leading up to it. The court recognized no mitigating circumstances in serving him with the highest possible sentence, while Anagnostopoulos was also served 11 years for killing his wife's pet dog, Roxy, and 6 months for committing perjury several times. In May 2022, Anagnostopoulos was found guilty of murder at the Athens mixed jury court. He was also found guilty of additional charges, including animal abuse and perverting the course of justice. The disgraced pilot was sentenced to life in prison and was given an additional 11 years and 6 months for the murder of the puppy, as well as a fine of €21, €0. Life imprisonment, plus 11 years and 6 months for killing the family dog, plus fines totaling €21,000. In a case that prompted widespread public outrage, the Crouch's family lawyer described the verdict as fair. It was a historic trial, as Caroline has now become a symbol in the struggle against violence targeting women. Harmanis said. Caroline's family lawyer called it a historic trial. He said Caroline had become a symbol in the struggle against violence targeting women. But for Caroline's family, no verdict could bring her back. Regarding the feelings of Caroline's parents about the court decision, the lawyer told them that they feel a relief. But their child does come back. They felt relief. But their daughter was gone forever. Their granddaughter would grow up without her mother. And no amount of justice could change that. Anagnostopoulos stared straight ahead dispassionately as the judge delivered the verdict. When the verdict was read, Babis showed no emotion. He stared straight ahead. Dispassionate, cold. The attitude of Babis Anagnostopoulos after he was sentenced to life in prison was pronounced. Commented Thanasis Harmanis, lawyer of the family of murdered British national Caroline Crouch. His reactions were the same of someone who was sentenced to 10 days. According to Caroline's family lawyer, his reaction to a life sentence was the same as if he had been sentenced to just 10 days. No remorse, no emotion, no acknowledgement of the life he had taken. After an appeal by Anagnostopoulos on September 29, 2023, the Mixed Court of Appeal in Athens unanimously affirmed the initial trial's verdict, which resulted in Babis Anagnostopoulos being resentenced to life imprisonment, an additional term of 11 years and 6 months, and a total fine of €21,000. He appealed the verdict, and in September 2023, the appeals court unanimously affirmed the original sentence. Life imprisonment again. His lawyer said the verdict was expected, and now the 34-year-old is expected to live decades behind bars. He is currently being held in Korydallos prison, which is known as the toughest jail in Greece, and is said to be unpopular among other inmates. He's now imprisoned in Korydallos prison, one of the toughest correctional facilities in Greece. Reports say he is unpopular among other inmates. Anagnostopoulos' lawyer told The Sun that his client had been attacked in a notorious Athens prison. In one incident, which was narrowly prevented by prison guards, Papaonides said an inmate had told him that he had sought him out and planned to kill him. Reports that he said, "I want to kill him, I came from another prison. I've been looking for him," are true, Papaonides told the outlet. But what about little Lydia, the baby girl who was 11 months old when her mother was killed? The child who was placed next to her mother's lifeless body by her own father. He also conveyed a statement of the mother of the 20-year-old that read, "He, Anagnostopoulos, took my child from me. If I lose my granddaughter, it will be a death blow." Those were the words of Caroline's mother, Susan. He took her child, and she couldn't bear to lose her granddaughter too. However, Caroline's parents, Susan and David, who live in Greece, sought legal sole custody of their granddaughter. In June 2021, a temporary sole custody order was granted to Caroline's parents, with the Anagnostopoulos family ordered to hand over the child. In October, the court made this custody agreement permanent. While Lydia will be raised solely by Susan and David, her paternal grandparents have been granted visitation rights. In October 2021, Caroline's parents won full custody of Lydia. The little girl would be raised by her maternal grandparents in the same place where her mother had grown up. We submitted for custody to be assigned to Caroline's mother because it is the most suitable environment. As in Athens, little Lydia will be known as the daughter of a murderer, while in Athens she will be the child who lost her mother. The family lawyer explained the reasoning. In Athens, Lydia would be known as the daughter of a murderer. On Athens, she would be remembered as the child who lost her mother. The child already has problems. In his subconscious, it is recorded that he was on the lifeless body of his mother, who was becoming cold as time passed. Social workers reported that even as a baby, Lydia may have retained memories of that night, of being placed next to her mother's body, of lying there as her mother grew cold. The Crouch family won custody of the couple's daughter, Lydia. She later moved to Manila, Philippines in order to be raised with her cousins. Lydia, daughter of the late Caroline Crouch and convicted murderer Babis Anagnostopoulos, is said to be in the Philippines since Sunday evening, specifically in Manila. According to the newspaper, the parents of Caroline Crouches made the decision to leave Greece, wanting their 2-year-old granddaughter to grow up in a safe environment, away from everything that reminds her of the murder of her mother. Susan and David Crouch's main priority is little Lydia, and they want her to grow up with the family of Caroline's half-sister Donna in the Philippines. In 2022, Caroline's parents made the decision to leave Greece. They moved to Manila, Philippines, where Lydia could grow up with the family of Caroline's half-sister, far away from the media attention, far away from the memories, far away from everything that happened. Also, according to the same media, Caroline's parents are thinking of changing the child's last name. While David Crouch has declared that he will do everything in his power to prevent Babis Anagnostopoulos from seeing little Lydia again. Caroline's father has vowed to do everything in his power to prevent Babis from ever seeing Lydia again. They're even considering changing the child's last name, a little girl, growing up on the other side of the world, raised by grandparents who loved her mother, protected from the truth about her father. That's the legacy of what Babis Anagnostopoulos did. So what can we learn from the story of Caroline Crouch? You can never be sure what each one of us hides inside himself, he tells Greek reporter. Those words came from one of Babis's friends, someone who had known him for years. Someone who never suspected he could do such a thing. Knowing him, you were seeing a great individual. You would have never imagined any of this. It is a total shock, says Anagnostopoulos' old friend. From the outside, Babis Anagnostopoulos seemed like a great guy, a successful pilot, a devoted husband, a loving father, but Caroline knew the truth. She wrote it in her diary, in code, because she was afraid of what might happen if he found it. The brutality of the murder has shocked the Greek public and brought conversations regarding intimate partner violence and domestic violence to the forefront of public discourse. The horror of such a young, vibrant life being snuffed out by the person that she trusted the most has shocked and disturbed the public, many of whom are now going back and reflecting on Anagnostopoulos' behavior after the crime. This case brought conversations about intimate partner violence to the forefront in Greece. It forced people to confront an uncomfortable truth. That danger can come from the people closest to us. That the person who promises to love and protect you can be the same person who takes your life. Let's not forget that we live in the era of technology, and the answers it gives are like irrefutable witnesses, and they do not get overturned in any courtroom. I'm so sorry for the poor woman and her mother who lives with this pain, Katerinopoulos stated. We live in an era of technology, and that technology can be an irrefutable witness. It cannot be intimidated, it cannot be fooled, it simply records the truth. Police have described Anagnostopoulos as a first-class actor after staging the elaborate crime scene and keeping up with the sick charade as a grieving widower for over a month. Babis Anagnostopoulos was called a first-class actor by police, and for 37 days his performance was flawless. He fooled everyone. But he couldn't fool the smartwatch. He couldn't fool the phone that tracked his steps. He couldn't fool the security camera that recorded when he removed the memory card. In the end, the truth always finds a way to surface. Sometimes it just takes a little longer. Caroline Louise Crouch was 19 years old when she died. She had been married for less than 2 years. She had been a mother for 11 months. She never got to see her daughter take her first steps, say her first words. Start school, graduate, fall in love. She never got to grow old with someone who truly loved her. She never got to live. In the diary, she divulged that she had suffered the loss of a child prior to her pregnancy with Lydia, and that this was taking an extreme emotional toll on her. She refers to fights and disagreements with her husband, which she attributes to her bad mental health and hormonal issues following the loss of her child. She had already lost one child before Lydia was born. She struggled with her mental health. She was isolated on an island, far from the support systems she needed. And she was trapped in a marriage that was slowly destroying her. On the night she died, she tried to book a hotel room. She was going to leave. She was finally going to escape, but she never got the chance. Caroline that night searched for a hotel room. Caroline was afraid. She had also written it in her diary that he would not let her leave so simply. She had written it in her diary, he would not let her leave so simply, and he didn't. As I finish telling you this story, I want you to remember something. Caroline Crouch wasn't just a victim. She wasn't just a name in a headline. She wasn't just a case study in how technology can solve crimes. She was a person. A daughter, a sister, a mother, a young woman with dreams and hopes and fears. A girl who fell in love too young with a man who was too old. A wife who tried to make her marriage work. Mother who stayed for her daughter. She was someone who deserved better. And somewhere in the Philippines right now, there's a little girl named Lydia who will one day ask questions about her mother, about what happened, about why she never got to know her. What will they tell her? Will they show her the Instagram photos of the smiling couple? Will they read her the diary entries written in code? Will they explain how a smartwatch helped bring her father to justice? Or will they simply tell her that her mother loved her, that her mother was brave, that her mother tried her best to protect her even when she couldn't protect herself? I don't have the answers to those questions. None of us do, but I do know this. Caroline Crouch's story matters. It matters because it reminds us that the people we love the most can sometimes hurt us the most. It matters because it shows us that technology can be a silent witness when human witnesses fail. And it matters because somewhere right now there's another woman hiding her diary entries. Another woman trying to book a hotel room. Another woman planning her escape. And maybe, just maybe, hearing Caroline's story will give her the courage to leave before it's too late. As the world remembers Caroline, her legacy lives on in the fight for justice for victims of domestic violence. While Babis may have fooled everyone for a time, in the end, the truth emerged, ensuring that Caroline's voice would be heard, even in death. Caroline's voice was silenced on May 11, 2021. But through her diary, through her smartwatch, through the investigation that followed, she found a way to speak from beyond the grave. And her killer, the man who thought he had planned the perfect crime, is now spending the rest of his life behind bars. Some might call that justice, but for Caroline's family, no justice will ever be enough. Because she's not coming back.